Why Joker? Introduction. Hi, I'm Sean, and I'd like to talk to you about movies for a while. I'm not an expert in any particular field, but I do think I understand how story structure and theming fit or don't fit into movies. I've written a couple of novels, and I'm easily brought out of movies, television, and books, any form of storytelling really, when there is something that doesn't quite work. And sometimes it's not necessarily when something doesn't work, but when it gets brought up and kind of brushed over. In today's subject, Joker, I was brought out of the experience by a lot of the explicit political references that this movie makes, but doesn't ultimately do anything with. I understand that they're not meant to be the main thrust of the movie, but I could not stop thinking about them all throughout the movie. This isn't to say that Joker is not a good movie. It's fine. It does a lot of things very well, and I will be talking about some of those things. Content warning. This video will contain explicit references to violence, mental illness, abuse, suicidal ideation, self-harm, prostitution, sexual assault, stalking, and comic books. If any of those things make you feel uncomfortable, please watch a different video. There's probably a cute animal video on the homepage, but I am not really able to talk about this film or the other films I'm going to reference without this content. Joker was one of the most popular movies of 2019, and it's kind of easy to see why. Joaquin Phoenix, Todd Phillips, and Scott Silver, and all of the other countless people that made this movie possible that never get credit or enough credit, and I don't have enough time to credit here, brought to life a relatively new version of possibly the most famous, iconic comic book villain in history. The movie is fascinating in a weird, uncomfortable way, but thematically, I don't think it entirely works, and I want to explore some of the thematic through lines that the movie presents and never fully realizes, and a few that I think it does. And this is based on my interpretation of the movie. This movie is vague in some ways. What we see on the screen is not necessarily the whole story and is meant to be read into and interpreted in different ways. But because these things were so front and center to me, I could not help but end up pretty focused on them.
That's right, Mary. I'm not political. I'm just trying to make people laugh.
This film is inextricably linked with politics in many ways, which is a little odd since the titular character denies having any political associations whatsoever. And I don't think that this is a mistake per se, but it does leave a lot of interesting thematic threads on the cutting room floor. The movie is set in 1980s Gotham, which is always been a direct parallel to New York City. And it takes real life influences from several historical events, such as the garbage strike of 1981, to the protests and riots and the media and establishment's coverage of both of those that mirror the Occupy Wall Street movement, to the Reagan era cuts to mental health care that directly impact Arthur in countless ways and arguably push him towards the ultimate events of the movie. Arthur himself is not a political character. He does not express political agency and is apathetic to the politics around him, but the movie is framed around these political ideologies that are pushing events in the background, which has the potential to be really interesting, but because these events are exclusively limited to Arthur's perspective, we never get to explore these themes. Thomas Wayne, in this film, is an antagonistic force both to Arthur and to the protesters as a whole. He is callous and disregards everyone else's feelings while playing himself up as some deific savior, the only person who can save this city. He makes this claim while actively blaming poor people for their situation and insisting that the murders that were definitionally apolitical were due to some anti rich sentiment. And even Arthur remarks on this in his rant to Franklin.
Why is everybody so upset about these guys? If it was me dying on the sidewalk, you'd walk right over me. I pass you every day and you don't notice me. But these guys, what, because Thomas Wayne went and cried about them on TV?
Thomas Wayne is a symbol of the political ideology that is actively harming Arthur. Arthur cannot fully articulate why this is happening to him, but due to the news clips that we see and the radio that we hear in the background, we know that Wayne is pushing political power and changing things, and he's the kind of rhetoric that he uses is very much in line with how politicians, conservative politicians most often, frame these issues and push blame on the disenfranchised. Wayne dismisses any concerns of why this could have happened to his employee or to his employees, and immediately jumps at the interviewer's suggestion that this is some purposeful killing to get back at rich people, that this is some kind of anti rich sentiment. He calls anyone who identifies with the disenfranchised clowns. And they embrace this moniker. The movie doesn't explore what this means. The dismissal of people abandoned to an apathetic city, left with their, until now, apathetic rage. And I feel like this has an unintended consequence because because Joker, is the figure that the movie and the movement rally around. And he never intended to have a substantial motive, in contrast to almost every other Joker we've seen in the past. It makes this movement, which is a direct parallel in both the framing and in the seeming ideology to the Occupy Wall Street movement. It makes that movement seem vindictive and petty to some degree, which mirrors the way that the media and authority figures framed the issue in years past. I don't necessarily think that this was intentional, but I would have liked to see these events of the movie in a different perspective at times so that we could see the movement as it is, not as a backdrop for some unstable individual's actions. Speaking of unstable individuals,
Are you having any negative thoughts? All I have are negative thoughts.
I think one of the things that is handled particularly well in this movie is mental illness. Arthur is a disturbed individual. I am not a psychiatrist. I do not have a background in psychology outside of 2 semesters in community college. I cannot speak to hallucinations or taking 8 pills a day, but I can speak to depression and the oppressiveness of the atmosphere that it creates. Arthur describes himself as a mentally ill loner in the scene where he shoots Murray. And that is widely true. He is entirely isolated. The only people he is fond of at any point in the movie are his mother, who he is somewhat kind to, Sophie, Murray, and Gary. He doesn't have any friends. His coworkers and boss are both uncomfortable with him because he is awkward, and the only people in his life that show him kindness in this movie are hallucinations. These hallucinations are also the only time where the colors in the movie are saturated, perhaps even oversaturated. His date with Sophie, his comedy special, his fantasy where Franklin brings him on stage and hugs him. Ironically, the only good things to happen to him in the movie are all in his head. The world around him seems to actively conspire to make him miserable. And he makes several explicit references to suicide throughout the movie, blowing his brains out with his fingers and playing with the gun in this exact fashion. He's miserable, and I I get that. I have been depressed for as as long as I can remember. I have suicidal thoughts every day and widely persevere by making little projects like this for myself, like this or my book, which is linked down below in the description. It's a it's about a man who fucks a ghost. Anyway, I can see how Arthur comes to the conclusion he does. His portrayal of a man led down a path of destruction makes emotional and narrative sense. We see him slowly lose everything until, as he states, he has nothing left. His idol abandoned him. His prospective father punched him in the face and actively calls him a clown, denigrating him. He found out that his mother lied to and abused him and allowed him to be abused. The only person who is nice to him, and I'm reticent to call it nice because he's respectful, and that's the extent of it, is Gary. Gary never mocks him and seems to, well, not exactly like him, doesn't actively try to harm him in any way. Everyone else in his life is abusive to one degree or another. And that kind of isolation breaks you. He feels ignored at best and literally beaten at worst. And the first time anyone seems to care about him, genuinely showing interest in his actions, is when the media portrays him as some kind of monster. And there is a certain amount of validity to this. Some studies have linked serial killers and mass murderers back to the attention that we and the media give them. There was this worry when the movie came out that it would inspire new killers and be an incel anthem. I don't think that's a fair shake to the movie. And seemingly nothing came of it. I think that far better examples of the incel ideology are the movies that inspired Joker. King of Comedy and Taxi Driver, which are both Robert De Niro films, constantly have the main character pining after a woman and feeling entitled to their attention. Arthur does have some concerning behavior in relation to Sophie in the movie, but it is almost universally portrayed as threatening or scary, in contrast to these other two movies, which portray it as either neutral or positive. I cannot guarantee that no one will be inspired to violence by the Joker, but I do think that the movie does do a good job as portraying him as a negative role model. We can empathize with him and recognize that his actions are wrong and should not be condoned. The same cannot be said about Taxi Driver's Travis Bickle. He has some of the same framing as Arthur, a lot of close up shots to his face, dramatic music surrounding him, but ultimately, his actions are justified by the narrative. Over the course of the movie, he is called a hero for saving a woman by killing several men, who, in fairness, are relatively bad people. But also, the narrative bent over backwards to portray them as terrible to justify the guy who is essentially radicalizing himself and building up to a murder. In contrast, King of Comedy does not really comment too much on Rupert Pupkin's state of mind, at least not explicitly. He is portrayed as a bit unhinged, but a more or less harmless variant. Delusions of grandeur mixed with a terribly naive nature, and some hallucinations. Both Rupert and Arthur are unreliable narrators, and we cannot be entirely sure of what happens in the movie when it is in their perspective. But Pupkins is just so much more harmless. He kidnaps a man and holds him hostage to do a comedy set, which might lead to a long, successful career, provided that that wasn't just another hallucination. These three movies are all portraying mental illness in weird lights. Honestly, to me, Joker seems to be the most grounded. Taxi Driver portrays it as a possibly positive trait that can save someone else. King of Comedy portrays it as harmless fun, basically. King of Comedy is a fairly light-hearted movie for such serious subject matter. It doesn't seem to make wide statements about people as a whole, but the other two films do.
You're awful, Murray.
Taxi Driver and Joker both have a lot to say about people. In the former, Travis Bickle goes on a full Rorschach-esque rant about how the city is full of trash that needs to be cleaned away.
Whatever it is, he should clean up this city here, because this city here is like an open sewer, you know? It's full of filth and scum. And sometimes I can hardly take it. Whatever becomes the president should just really clean it up. You know what I mean? Sometimes I go out and I smell it, I get headaches, it's so bad, you know? And they just never go away, you know? It's like, I think that the president should just clean up this whole mess here. He should just flush it right down the fucking toilet.
With this, and his later obsession with the purity of his body and purging himself of the trash, he is spending his time basically trying to become some idealized man, and is idolizing violence in much the same way that terrorists do.
June 29th. I gotta get in shape now. Too much sitting has ruined my body. Too much abuse has gone on for too long. From now on, it'll be 50 push-ups each morning, 50 pull-ups. There'll be no more pills. There will be no more bad food, no more destroyers of my body. From now on, it'll be total organization. Every muscle must be tight.
He loathes Betsy's coworker and associates him with a lesser person and dehumanizes him to some extent and looks down on prostitutes and decides to kill a pimp and the surrounding prostitute support network. This is the manifestation of his nihilism. This is a different breed of nihilism than Arthur's. Travis is the kind of apathetic person who would just walk over Arthur as he was dying on the street. He opens the movie by saying he cleans up blood from the back of his cab, never implying that he really ever interfered with whatever was causing it. Travis's ideology towards people does not seem too dissimilar to the statement that Randall makes in the movie.
Okay? I heard about the beatdown you took. Fucking savages.
It was just a bunch of kids. I should have left it alone.
No, we'll take everything from you if you do that. All the crazy shit out there, they're animals.
Which seems pretty congruent with the ideology of everyone being trash. But this nihilism goes deeper than this. King of Comedy others Rupert to one degree or another by never really taking him seriously or having a frank conversation with him. But realistically, he always does come off a little strange or different. He's socially awkward and pushes this on other people kind of aggressively. People are also constantly othering Arthur. It starts from the scene in the movie where people just steal his sign and beat him up for seemingly no reason. It continues with his boss not buying into the story of him being jumped. The social worker dismisses or doesn't really seem to actively listen to Arthur. The woman on the bus basically harasses him for entertaining a child for a few moments. Randall initially seems friendly, if only because he has some shady side deal and seems to be trying to get rid of a gun, but later lies to Hoyt, the clown boss, about Arthur seeking out the gun. His mother shits on his dreams of being a comic for no real reason. The three Wayne Enterprise employees harass a woman and then jump Arthur when he draws their attention due to his laughing, making his first murders arguably self-defense. Murray, his hero, mocks his career callously. Alfred shows him no decency when he's at the gate. Wayne laughs in his face and shows no empathy, coldly calling his mother crazy and not even trying to show him any form of care or decency. Cops mock him and his career. Every real person in this movie is an absolute bastard. Bastard-coated bastards with bastard filling. This is a remarkably nihilistic worldview of people and society as a whole. Joker is entirely pessimistic about humanity. It fundamentally seems to believe that there is no hope and that no one will help you. The figures that are displayed as trying to help or comfort Arthur, and thus are the few less depressing aspects of this movie, as a whole, are all apathetic to him as opposed to being outright hostile. I think that this theme is powerful, if inaccurate to reality. I'm not saying that everyone is a good person and that no one will hurt you or use you to their own ends. People absolutely will. But to have everyone exclusively be that way to Arthur, or to give Arthur ample ammunition, pun intended, to use against society, seems needlessly dark and is just the narrative trying to justify his actions to one degree or another. Conclusion. Ultimately, I think The Joker is a movie that is trying to do a lot of different things in a lot of different directions, and this did kind of hurt the movie. It honestly feels like we just took The Killing Joke, Taxi Driver, and King of Comedy and smushed them together and baked them into a cake. There are a lot of homages to all of these elements, and at times I feel like it can become a little discordant. It is an alright movie that I wish had explored some of the themes that it brought up a little bit more elegantly and a little bit more fully. But I also get why a lot of people like it. Joaquin Phoenix really brings a disturbed, somewhat relatable character to life, and I think everyone can empathize with someone who has been ignored and othered at some point in their life. The shot composition and the soundtrack and the sound design were really fantastic. I can't think of an I can't think of a single scene that didn't convey the emotion it was going for very well. But its political theming did fall short for me, especially since it's the backdrop of this movie. The political theming is so important because without it, nothing in the movie happens. The movie just doesn't want to make commentary on it, and I'm kind of disappointed by that. But this is also my interpretation of the movie, the things that stuck out to me and that I couldn't really ignore. I've heard a couple of other interpretations of the movie, and they're very positive, and they interpreted everything in the movie in a much different light than I did. Uh, if you disagree with me, that's okay. I want you to disagree with me about this movie. I think it's a movie that we can have a lot of different discussions about, and a lot of different ideas are going to come out of it. If you did watch this, thank you. um, please comment below what you thought of the video and what you thought of my thoughts on it and how I presented. Um, I have a couple more video ideas coming up. I'm gonna do M. Night Shyamalan's The Village because I feel like a lot of people talk about how M. Night Shyamalan is a bad, or at least a weird director who makes some decisions that don't ultimately work out a lot of the time. And everyone skips over The Village. We always focus on The Happening and Avatar The Last Airbender and Devil, all of which are bad movies, and I want to acknowledge that, but I've never seen anyone review The Village. So, I don't know. I haven't watched it since 2004, and I'm going to watch it, of course, for the video. And from my memory, it's a really, really boring movie. And I want to talk about how boring it is. So, like, comment, and subscribe if you want to. If not, that's okay too. I hope that you have a wonderful day, night, year, life.